I think God must be a cowboy at heart. He made wide open spaces from the start. He made grass and trees and mountains, and a horse to be a friend, and trails to lead old cowboys home again. Have you ever watched an old western movie full of action-packed cowboy adventure and wondered how the American cowboy came to be? What about the clothes they wore and why they seemed to never ever settle down? The American West has a very interesting history, from the evolution of the saddle, the outfits the cowboys wore, gunfights, poker games, and even what we've come to know as rodeo. The history of the American cowboy began with the Vaqueros, who were Hispanic and black California cattlemen that were hired by ranchers. Cattlemen were originally farmers, whereas the Vaqueros were very well-trained horsemen. The cowboy and the buckaroo began working alongside the vaquero. The term vaquero in Spanish means cowman, and with the Spanish accent, vaquero became known as buckaroo. Cattle drives and horse training began to establish the reputation and lingo for the western cowboy. Vaqueros influenced other cowboys in horsemanship, equipment, and language. The cowboy and the buckaroo both stayed in cow camps, only working through part of the year, moving around with the work and with the cattle. They were drifters, so they seldom ever settled down to become family men. My brother TJ left home when he was 16 to go to Nevada to be a buckaroo. He was featured in Western Horseman magazine and has established quite a reputation for training horses. The history of the American cowboy included equipment, gear, clothing, and language that was passed on by the vaquero, such as a rawhide headstall with a McCarty and a Bozell, a rieta, which is a rawhide braided rope, your cack or rig, which is another name for saddle, quirts were whips, and of course spurs. Jingle bobs were hung on the rowels as spurs and kept rhythm with the horse, which inspired many old-time ballads and songs sung on the trail. The cowboy and the buckaroo used clothing similar to the vaquero. Several versions of chaps were used depending on the territory and weather, such as chinks, woolies, armadas, batwings, and shotguns. Cuffs were worn on the sleeves of brush popper shirts to protect against wear and tear. They usually only had 1 or 2 shirts to get them throughout the year because they didn't get paid till the end of the job, and then they'd get to go to town. Tall top boots helped save on pant legs as well as protect against sagebrush, cactus, and even being kicked by the occasional cow. The original hat was designed around the sombrero with a round top, but over time the buckaroos turned it into a flat top hat. Wild rags are worn around the neck to protect against the elements, and they wore wool vests for warmth. The cowboy and the buckaroo began speaking the language of the vaquero. Cayuse is another word for horse. Meal or grub is called chuck. Cavvy is to be really good at what you're doing. A remuda is a string of horses that's owned by the ranch, and savvy is a string of horses that are owned by the buckaroos. A houlihan is where you throw a backwards loop into a remuda to catch a horse. Cow camp is the camps the cowboys stayed in, usually consisted of cabins or tents made out of canvas or hide, or occasionally just a bedroll thrown on the ground. The range boss was the manager of the cow outfit out on the range, and the cow boss was the manager of the cow outfit at the home ranch headquarters. The buckaroo boss was in charge of all the cowboys, and the jigger boss was second in command to the buckaroo boss and roped all the cowboys' horses every morning according to what the cow boss needed for the day. All other hands were called waddies. The history of the American cowboy included the tradition of rodeo, which was invented on the cattle drive to cure boredom. Reps from each outfit were sent out to pick up stray cattle. They were pretty good riders, and they had strings of broncs, so they'd challenge the cowboys to a bronc match. Rope-ins were held to test cowboys and buckaroos on their roping ability before they hired on to an outfit. That's how roping got started. Bronc riding and roping were rodeo's first 2 events. My parents actually met at a rodeo. It's a funny story. When the kids asked my dad how him and Grandma met, he said that he was at a rodeo. He said, "Boys, I looked across the arena and I seen her. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I just knew I had to have her." And then he started laughing and said, "It's been 55 years and I still haven't gotten that sorrel mare." The history of the American cowboy has long since changed into a world separating today's definition of buckaroo and cowboy, which in today's world depends on your whereabouts. Buckaroos are typically from Nevada, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Montana, whereas cowboys are considered to be places from like Texas and Oklahoma. The buckaroo attire of today is still close to tradition, with tall top boots, deep-seated saddles with buck and rolls, rawhide braided horse gear, and spurs with large rowels. The cowboy attire of today is changing with style, usually black felt hats, straw hats, cinch or tuff jeans, Flashy Western shirts, square-toed boots seem to be in style, and what we call bling bling on your belt. The American cowboy has a long tradition in the establishment of the West with lonely lives of chasing cattle and breaking horses. It is a passionate lifestyle chosen because of the relationship with the horse, love of the land, and a desire to keep the West Western.